In our headlines on this Friday afternoon, September 30th. In yet another display of defiance, North Korea launched 2 more short-range ballistic missiles into waters east of the Korean peninsula late Thursday, following US Vice President Kamala Harris's departure from South Korea. In the Philippines, Finance Minister Chojeok is taking over the reins for next year's Asian Development Bank gathering, which will be held in Songdo, west of capital Seoul, in May 2023. And starting October 1st, those arriving into South Korea from overseas will no longer be required to take the post-arrival PCR test, as authorities here lift all COVID-19 entry protocols. We begin with additional acts of aggression by North Korea. 2 more missiles were launched Thursday evening following US Vice President Kamala Harris's departure from South Korea. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Bae-eun-ji reports.
For the 3rd time in just 5 days, North Korea fired missiles once again toward waters east of the Korean peninsula. The launch follows the firing of 2 short-range ballistic missiles a day earlier and on Sunday. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said Thursday evening that it detected 2 short-range ballistic missiles between 8:48 p.m. and 8:57 p.m., launched from the Suncheon region in South Pyongan province. The military said the missiles flew around 350 kilometers at an altitude of some 50 kilometers, at 5 times the speed of sound. The missiles were reportedly fired from a transporter erector launcher and hit an uninhabited island called Al Island, just like the ones fired on Wednesday. Following the launch, South Korea's National Security Council held an emergency meeting and stressed that the recent situation regarding the series of ballistic missile launches is serious. It vowed to strengthen combined defense readiness with the U.S., while being ready for any additional launches, such as the regime's submarine-launched missiles. The latest action from Pyongyang came a day ahead of a trilateral anti-submarine warfare exercise between South Korea, U.S., and Japan in the East Sea that's been planned to better detect and counter North Korean submarines. It also came as Seoul and Washington wrapped up their 4-day bilateral drill on Thursday, involving a U.S. nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS Ronald Reagan. According to an expert, Thursday's move appears to have been carried out in protest against these military drills, and also against the U.S. Vice President's visit to Seoul.
Overall, North Korea's actions are aimed at telling its people that it's indeed going to strengthen nuclear capabilities. If we look at the timing of the launch, it's a protest against the large-scale South Korea-US combined exercise and US Vice President Kamala Harris's visit to the region and the DMZ, and against her remarks criticising the North's brutal dictatorship and human rights violations.
He added that the North is likely to continue firing missiles and that the series of launches may lead up to its 7th nuclear test. The expert also said that although the regime has completed all preparations for its first nuclear test in 5 years, it has not gone ahead with it yet, probably due to opposition from China. Bae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
On the international front, Russia is pushing ahead with plans to annex 4 Ukrainian regions despite widespread international outcry. Our Kim Hyo-sun has the latest.
It's widely expected that Russia will announce on Friday the annexation of 4 Moscow-controlled regions of Ukraine, representing around 15% of Ukraine's total territory.
Tomorrow, a ceremony to sign the agreements on the accession of new territories into the Russian Federation will take place in the Grand Kremlin Palace in St. George's Hall.
President Vladimir Putin will be presiding over the ceremony and is expected to give a major speech and meet with Moscow-appointed administrators of the Ukrainian regions. This comes as Ukraine and the West have strongly rejected the hastily arranged referendums in the Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions, held 7 months after Russia sent troops into Ukraine as, quote, illegitimate shams. Voting ultimately returned a result in favor of incorporating the areas into Russia.
The United States will never recognize Russia's claims on Ukraine's sovereign territory. This so-called referendum was a sham, an absolute sham. The results were manufactured in Moscow.
Biden also explained that Washington is working with allies on imposing new sanctions once Russia annexes areas of Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stressed that Moscow will not get the territories.
Russia will not get any new territory from Ukraine. Russia will only join the disaster it has brought to the occupied territory of our country.
He also stressed that Russia could avoid the most damaging consequences of its war against Ukraine, but to do so, he explained that President Putin had to be stopped. This comes as the EU announced new sanctions against Moscow, with Finland announcing that it will ban Russian citizens traveling with tourist visas from entering the country. The decision comes on the heels of an increasingly heated debate in the EU on whether Russian citizens should not be permitted to apply for visas or banned from entering the bloc altogether. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has called for a greater sense of urgency in tackling turbulent financial markets as the local currency surrenders significant ground to the US dollar, triggering rampant fears about capital flight. The remarks were made at the third meeting of top economic officials since taking office in May on this Friday to review economic and financial conditions. To take a listen.
과거에 비해 대외 건전성 측면에서 튼튼한 방파제를 쌓아두었고 또 시장 안정 조치를 일부 취했습니다마는 더 긴장감을 갖고 대응해야 할 때입니다.
This latest meeting comes as the won has lost 17% of its value to the greenback this year, while the benchmark Kospi plunged 27% during the same period. Friday's meeting was attended by central bank officials and corporate executives. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho is taking over the reins for next year's Asian Development Bank meeting. According to the Finance Ministry on this Friday, Chu will chair the annual gathering, which will be held in Songdo, west of Seoul, in May 2023. Meanwhile, speaking at this year's meeting in Manila this week, Chu revealed that the theme of next year's forum will be reconnecting Asia and overcoming global uncertainties as the pandemic has restricted regional economic collaboration. The ADB, with 68 member countries, offers support for developing countries in the region. Foreign Minister Park Jin met the ambassadors of 17 Latin American and Caribbean countries, that is, on this Friday morning and called for stronger cooperation, noting that this year marks the 60th anniversary of diplomatic ties with several Latin American nations. Park stressed it was time to take these ties to the next level. He also took time to share the Yoon administration's plans to expand cooperation with the region in areas such as digital economy, energy and agriculture. The minister also asked for regional support for South Korea's bid to host the 2030 World Expo in Busan. On the pandemic front, come tomorrow, that is October 1st, those entering South Korea from abroad will not be required to take the post-arrival PCR test. Our Kim Bo-young has more on this shift in COVID-19 strategy and others.
The number of new COVID-19 cases is keeping its downward trend. South Korea on Friday reported 28,497 new cases. This is a fall of around 2,300 from the previous day and 600 cases less than a week earlier. It's the lowest number seen on a Friday in 12 weeks. There were 352 severely ill patients reported and 42 deaths. With such a clear downward trend, the government has decided to lift some of the preventive measures that have been in place. Starting October 1st, the requirement for inbound travelers to take PCR tests will be removed, making international travel much easier. However, a health ministry official said the system might come back in if necessary.
Starting October 1st, 12 a.m., South Korea is to lift the post-entry PCR test requirement. Those who show symptoms within 3 days of their arrival can get a free PCR test at public health centers. Yet the country might reintroduce post-entry testing if there is a need to strengthen the entry checks, for example, if a subvariant with a high fatality rate occurs.
Face-to-face visits at nursing facilities and hospitals have been restricted since July 25th due to the COVID-19 surge at that time. However, considering the stabilized COVID-19 situation and high vaccination rate, the health authorities have decided to loosen up the measures, including allowing face-to-face visits starting October 4th.
Before the visitors come, if they get a negative result using self-testing kits, they can visit whenever they want. Visitors should wear their masks and refrain from eating if possible.
Until now, only those at nursing facilities who needed to see doctors outside were allowed to go out. But now, those who have received a fourth vaccination shot will be able to do so. Though our daily lives are slowly getting back to normal, the health officials stressed caution in order to prevent a possible twindemic of both influenza and a COVID-19 resurgence. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Also, on the local front, whether it's for a cup of coffee or even a simple meal, convenience stores here are emerging as popular venues among cost-cautious consumers. Our Ising-jae's details.
A line of people inside the convenience store, each with a cup of ice waiting for their turn. 5 coffee machines are running non-stop as office workers come one after another during rush hour. The price of the coffee is just 1,200 won, or 84 cents, as there's no additional labor cost included, with the customers brewing the coffee themselves. In fact, consumers are turning to convenience stores as the price of coffee at major franchises continue to increase due to the rise in coffee bean prices driven by climate change.
First of all, convenience stores are everywhere, so I use them often because they are easy to access. But the price is cheaper than franchise coffee shops, and there is no difference in taste.
In fact, coffee sales at this particular convenience store increased by more than 40% compared to the same month last year. And as the cost of eating out, as well as food ingredient prices are rising one after another, the number of people looking to buy side dishes from convenience stores is also on the rise. From side dishes to main dishes, many convenience stores now sell a wide variety of options for consumers. In fact, sales of such foods increased by more than 20% compared to last year, thanks to demand from single-person households.
It tastes good and the price is good, so I use it often. Also, it's great in that it is packaged in an amount that is just enough to eat for a day or two.
And more convenience stores are launching their own branded products and selling them at low prices. Another cheaper convenience store option? Milk.
Inflation is constantly rising, and to keep pace with it, we are launching fresh products and side dishes at low prices. In particular, the price of milk is expected to rise in the future, so we have launched at an affordable price.
With high inflation, consumers have no problem giving up on brand name products in exchange for cheaper but still delicious options at convenience stores. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The importance of preparation was well highlighted by Benjamin Franklin when he claimed by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. Well, these words of wisdom appear to have gathered city pundits from here and elsewhere for talks on preparing for potential problems within urban settings in the years ahead. Our Kim Jong-sil was there.
Experts from major cities around the world, including New York, Tokyo, Beijing, all gathered together in Seoul or via video link to discuss urban problems and the future of cities. It was hosted by the Seoul Institute to celebrate its 30th anniversary.
Many of the problems that Seoul is facing right now are the problems that South Korea will face in the future, and major cities around the world are also facing the same problems as well. So, through today's event, we hope that this will be an opportunity to discuss various problems and how to solve them.
In the case of Seoul in particular, he also predicts that in 2050, the roles of artificial intelligence and robots will rise, as well as those of foreigners and elderly women. An expert from New York City opened the session with a keynote speech. He said it's important to come up with long-term plans that cover a variety of sectors such as transportation, economic development, public health, and social equity. Another expert from Tokyo said while Seoul and Tokyo are very similar in many ways, the two cities are not competing with each other, the small neighborhoods are. He explained that in the future, there will come a time when two areas with strong characteristics and competitiveness, such as Shimokitazawa and Hongdae, are going to compete when it comes to things like tourism. The Institute emphasized that it's important to come up with a grand plan to prepare for the future. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, for those of you who have yet to make plans for the long weekend ahead here in the country, my colleague Song Yoo-jin recommends a trip to Andong City, where a traditional dance festival is currently underway. Do take a look.
Talchum, meaning mask dance in Korean, it's a stage play where performers wear masks and incorporate dancing and dialogue into their act. It dates all the way back to primitive times when people danced wearing animal-shaped masks for a successful hunt. And the best place to enjoy Talchum is Andong City in Gyeongsang-Buk-do Province, known as South Korea's roofless museum with numerous cultural heritages. To preserve and promote Talchum, the city has been holding the Andong Mask Dance Festival since 1997. It's back again from Thursday after a 2-year hiatus due to the pandemic. The event has a lot to offer besides Talchum performances.
And you can enjoy like some flea market or like some displays or like a very interesting places to enjoy. For example, like you can learn how to make the mask, or like you can learn how to play the mask dance.
There's also a metaverse zone where users can play games and see the Hawetal, a wooden mask of the Andong Hawe village. The World Mask Play competition is held with the aim of discovering fresh talent around the world. But the big fun starts after the sun goes down.
I'm out in downtown Andong joining the Arirang parade. People here are doing their own version of Talchum with some great music. And this year, to give Talchum a modern twist, there is an EDM party where visitors can combine the two.
Popular Korean artists, including singer and comedian Bang Myung-soo, also came. Festival goers were mesmerized by Talchum's traditional but trendy charm.
I visited here with my dad 10 years ago, so it brings me back old memories. I think EDM will help Talchum become more widely known among younger people.
Before, I don't know what's the mass is all about. So when I went here like a couple of years ago, I know what's the meaning of, there's different kind of meaning of mask.
The 5-day event runs across the city until Monday. Interpretation services are provided for non-Korean speakers. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News, Andong.
And music fans across the globe may have heard about making love out of nothing at all, but how many have heard about making music out of leaves literally from the trees? Our culture correspondent Kim Hyun-sung has the tune.
This is a musical instrument. It might not seem like it, but when it meets the right player, this is a Chojeok, a Korean leaf flute. The instrument dates back to at least the 15th century. Akakwebom, a 9-volume extensive musical guide published during the Joseon dynasty, talks about this leaf flute. The book says tangerine or citron leaves are the best to play. Records also show King Yeonsan-gun from the 15th century was particularly fond of these leaf flute sounds. But over the years, Chojeok has faded in popularity. These two brothers are keeping the tradition alive, honing their skills for 2 decades.
Our mother played Korean traditional music for almost 70 years, so we were exposed to all kinds of Korean music from a young age. We first started to blow the leaf flute around 20 years ago.
This instrument is in the Asian records, but it's been long forgotten. But making this instrument known when we are performing on stage is our greatest joy.
The brothers also take their performances overseas, going on stage with only leaves. It's harder than it looks, even when getting one-on-one pointers from the flute artisans themselves.
이거 아닌 것 같아요, 그렇죠?
아니, 좀 하시면 된대. 시간이 조금 필요한 악기라고 보시면 되고.
네, 어렵네요. Needless to say, it was an utter failure. But the best part of this instrument, anyone can try it anywhere and play any song. So if you're feeling up for a tune, why don't you pick up a leaf and just start playing? Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
South Korean esports teams are competing in the 2022 League of Legends World Championship, the biggest tournament of the year. The competition, also called the Worlds 2022, kicked off on Thursday in Mexico City. 24 teams from around the world are taking part, with 4 from South Korea. If a South Korean team wins this year, the country will have won 7 world championships. The tournament runs through November in cities across Mexico and the US.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. Hurricane Ian has left a trail of devastation in its wake as it crossed Florida en route to the Carolinas. At least 17 people are reported dead, and many are unaccounted for after the hurricane battered the state with powerful winds, rains, and storm surges starting Wednesday local time. The combination saw homes flooded, roads cut off, and over 2.6 million Floridians without power. As of Thursday, rescue teams have been working to save thousands of people trapped in their homes. Airports are to remain closed until Friday, and some areas are working to distribute food and water. Hurricane Ian is now South Carolina bound after recharging over the Atlantic Ocean. It initially weakened to a tropical storm while moving across Florida, but has since intensified again to a Category 1 hurricane. A hurricane warning has been issued for the entire coast of South Carolina. Workers downed tools and took to the streets of France on Thursday as several unions called a nationwide strike. They are calling for higher pay amid rising prices. The trade unions included school teachers, train and bus drivers, and those working in the nuclear industry. The strike led to disruptions to schools, the transport sector, and even saw a drop in nuclear energy production. It is the first major strike since French President Emmanuel Macron won re-election in April. Unions have also called for the scrapping of a reform planned by President Macron to raise the legal retirement age from 62 years old to 65. Myanmar's deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi has been sentenced to another 3 years in prison. A military court found her guilty of violating the country's Official Secrets Act in a ruling made behind closed doors on Thursday. She already faces 20 years in prison over a series of cases, with more trials still to come. The former elected leader has had multiple charges thrown at her by ruling generals since being overthrown in a military coup in February 2021. At the same time, Suu Kyi's former economic advisor, Australian Sean Turnell, was also sentenced to 3 years on the same charges. Australia's foreign ministry has rejected the ruling, calling for Turnell's release. So far, details of their alleged violations remain unknown. And finally, a car driven by James Bond in the most recent 007 flick has gone under the hammer for $3 million. Sold on Wednesday at an auction held by Christie's, the Aston Martin DB5 replica stunt car appeared in No Time to Die. One of only 2 such cars in the world, it comes complete with imitation machine guns built into its headlights. The car is just one of 35 James Bond-themed lots up for sale, which include other cars, accessories, and costumes from the 60-year-old franchise. The auction is set to continue until October 5th, James Bond Day. The proceeds will be donated to charity. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Friday afternoon. Today, Midwestern regions, including the capital, are dealing with poor air quality for the second day in a row. The fine dust level is going to be high all day long in and around the Seoul metropolitan area and temporarily high in Jeollabuk-do province tonight. Please wear a mask that filters out the dust if you're heading outside. And it was a touch crisp this morning, but late season high temperatures are still in the air. Gaps in readings are double figures in Seoul and even in the mid-teens in Gyeongju. So dress accordingly and eat healthily so as not to catch a cold. And overall highs are slightly higher or similar to yesterday. Late season high temperatures of 28 or 29 degrees are dominant across the country. And the warmth will subside from Sunday, and there's an autumn rain forecast on Monday, starting from central regions in Jeollabuk-do province before expanding nationwide. And after that, highs will drastically tumble to the low 20s. Now let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
That ends Friday's edition of the Daily Report. But do stay tuned for our panel talk show coming up right after this break. Thank you for now.